Hello and welcome to Todd and Shane's Cloudy Podcast number 423, recorded live Wednesday, February 20th, 2019. Shane, if you had to put a code to 423, what would it be?
Probably something like unprocessable entity. I think you really just want to hear me say processable because you knew I couldn't say it.
Is it like delegable?
Yes. Oh, we didn't talk about that last week. We should bring that up here.
We should have a whole podcast devoted to delegable.
Yeah. Oh, Meryl would like to insert audience clap. So
yeah, I appreciate that, Meryl. You can clap anytime you'd like. That always welcome. We're going to see Meryl here in a couple of weeks down in Branson, so that will be good.
Oh man, I don't really
He's gonna
like
be over
Meryl.
There. Meryl's gonna. We got a heads up so we can prepare ourselves mentally for it.
Okay.
Production notes. I think I did not publish last week's podcast yet, but I will do that quickly. I was traveling last week. I was in Miami. If you're watching the video, you'll see my forehead's a bit sunburned or peeling or in various stages of trying to heal. I got a little bit of sun.
Your hair does look a little fluffier today. You got a little conditioner. Did you get a conditioner? Did you go to the spa?
I didn't. So I didn't put any gel or anything in it today. So I could kind of, because it's right around the edge, and now I'm all self-conscious and
No, I think it looks good. I kind of like the little volume you got going on.
I didn't do anything with it. I just so we got like 7 inches of snow last night, and so I was out this morning taking care of snow, and then was running a little late, so I just didn't do all my regular daily hygiene stuff. So this is the natural look for me. This is
Moving on before I say something I regret.
before you throw open your mouth. Yeah, so it's been a busy week for Office 365 and SharePoint and all of that. Kind of the big story and the one that bothered me the most is Teams. The much maligned Teams app had an outage on Monday. And this is important, Shane, because it directly inconvenienced me.
Yes, I knew that's where we were headed. Thank you.
That's so I have many grievances against Teams, and now I have one more that it went out on me Monday when I was going to use it.
And is that so? Wait, we got to stop. We'll edit this in post production. Yeah, right. That's not going to happen. When you asked me what the code was, I gave you last week's code. This week's code is actually it is 420. Wait, we're on 423. I'm really messing this segment up today, and so I just want to stop and talk about how badly I was doing at this segment. Real smooth transitions.
Yes.
So yes, because I don't care about your team stuff. Is really what I'm trying to do.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
But so 423 is locked, which is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep you locked out of this topic on Teams. No, yes, I didn't even realize. I literally didn't even know that Teams was down. So it's interesting. So can you tell me more about how Teams was down and how it personally affected you and your fluffy hair?
Yes, and my fluffy hair and I were both much aggrieved. This was, I think, a continuation of the problems Microsoft has had over the last 3 or 4 weeks. I think it was an authentication issue. Because what seemed to happen was if you were in Teams on the client or on the web or whatever, everything was fine. But what nailed me was I was trying to show a customer a thing, and I'd sent out a meeting invitation, and she was going to try to join the thing in Teams, and she could not get connected. My existing connection with all the 6 or 8 teams that I'm on, they all worked fine, no problems. But if you went to the web page, you got a 500 error or something, and you couldn't sign it with a new client.
Interesting. So I may have encountered this, and I've just gotten so used to Teams not working in the way that I want to use it that when it just, I didn't even think that it was actually down. I just assumed Teams was being a butthead, and I moved on. So, but I did encounter this now. All right. Well, thank you for making this more interesting to me.
Yeah. And so Meryl's saying in the chat room, everything was working, but he logged out and then tried to log back in, and boom. And if you know Meryl, boom, Meryl is a big man. He plays the bass as if just to add even more boom to the booming man that Meryl is. So when he says boom, boom is the case. Now, Eric brings up in the chat room, we've had Skype problems in the past. Absolutely. Skype was not, when we switched over from Messenger to Skype, I may have hated Skype as much as I hate Teams. So that's all clear. That's true. But yeah, so it was a big deal. And I think it's part of that thing that I feel upset that Microsoft is thrusting Teams upon us, forcing us to use Teams. I'm using it against my will. And then when I try to use it, it doesn't work. And I'm like, no, come on.
That is the weird thing about our new dynamic, the world changes every 32 seconds, is sometimes they're in such a hurry to get us to start moving in that direction that they do. They push us to new capabilities faster than they're ready for us to use those new capabilities. And it just leaves a bad taste in all of our mouths. I don't know.
Yeah. Stacy in the chat room is mentioning something that the phone app was working, but web and desktop was down. And I think I remember something about that, seeing some stuff on Twitter. The people were having that thing. Yeah. And I think, so to your point, Microsoft, among many other cloud developers, have developed this MVP philosophy that they put out the minimal viable product. And I think really the issue comes down to their definition of minimally viable and our definition of minimally viable are not always the same.
Yeah.
And that's why we get into these kind of issues. But it was, so, I mean, I couldn't get a hold of this customer. So then it became this cascading thing. So I think I was texting with the customer or emailing. I can't remember. We're like, all right, so Teams is down. I'd looked out. Everybody on the internet was complaining. There was a message in the Office 365 Admin Center. If you went to the admin messages, there was a note there, so I knew it wasn't just me. Another thing that was funny was there's a status page, and it's like maybe like status.microsoft.com or something. There was nothing there about it, and everybody's like, oh, come on, Microsoft, there's nothing there. But if you read the text on that page, that is the status page for the Admin Center. The Admin Center was fine. It was Teams that was not. So that was a good lesson there. If you think something's broken, go to the Admin Center if you've got a tenant admin account. But yeah, so then this customer like, well, what else can we use? So we tried to use these other things, and we had to download clients. And I'm like, you know what? I'm free tomorrow. Hopefully Teams will be fixed by Tuesday. So we ended up meeting yesterday instead.
Yeah, and for that very reason, we still have a GoToMeeting account, right? So for us, we try Teams. If Teams doesn't work, we go to Skype for Business. If Skype for Business doesn't work, we go to GoToMeeting, right? So I have a lot of remote meetings with people that are outside of my org. And I guess that's just not a high priority use case for Microsoft because Teams sucks in that experience.
Yeah. And it's funny. So that absolutely Teams is tolerable until you get more than one tenant, and then everything falls apart. And whether you're a guest in another tenant or whether you have a different login in another tenant, either one, it's horrible. And to hear Microsoft's response to that, they say, well, you guys are MVPs, you're consultants, your use case is not the same. There's some validity to that. We definitely use the product differently. But I bring that up to all of my customers that have that, and my customers are starting to have that same thing too, because they joined other things, and so it's not just us. And
yeah, and I still think at some point in Teams, they're going to have to backpedal on this whole concept of if I create a meeting and you join from your tenant, some of your security policies still apply to the meeting, even though it's my meeting, right? That is just a level
they need to figure that out. Yeah.
Debauchery that is just not sustainable. I mean, that's awkward.
Yeah. But Teams was down. It's back up now. Again, I think in my head, as I try to reason through all of this, it's Microsoft tightening authentication stuff in the background. It's Microsoft knowing that bad guys are trying to get in some way, somehow, and they're plugging holes. And that's how that happens.
Well, did you see that somewhere over, I don't have a link to this one, but someone stole DNS from, I think it was over in Asia, like a group of one of their major providers, and did a whole bunch of injection attacks and spun up some fake certificates. That was late last week, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder if Microsoft was they realized they had some of those same DNS exploits that those guys were using. It's an interesting, we've had it several times now over the last couple of years, but sometimes hacking DNS is a little easier, or not hacking, but manipulating DNS has turned out to be a little easier than trying to steal and break into other people's environments. So. Yeah,
and I almost think, so you do a lot with Flow and all that kind of stuff. I'm almost like in my head envisioning like a Flow that runs once an hour and checks your DNS records and makes sure they resolve to what you think they're going to resolve to. And if they don't, your pager goes crazy and whatever. And because, you just can't, like DNS, you can't trust that doesn't get hacked.
Yeah. It's, the DNS stuff is always interesting. And so, back to your point, right? Microsoft was probably fixing something to make sure that wouldn't happen because they're super proactive, but
oh my God, yeah.
Sometimes it causes a little pain and.
Yep.
I If it's down, the bad guys can't get in either. So yay.
I was talking to another customer. I'm like, I didn't do this on purpose, but I'm like, well, the whole thing, I'm sure it's a security thing. I'm sure they're patching something. And then I'm like, yep. And if it's down, bad guys can't get in. Good guys can also not get in, but it's secure.
Remember we said the only true secure server is one that you disconnect from everything, you bury in the ground, and
yep.
No one, not even you, can use it. It's the only secure server you can have.
True C2 compliance. Yep. So another little blemish for Microsoft. The SharePoint patches came out last week, Patch Tuesday, and today I saw a post that there is a regression in the February 2019 patch for SharePoint 2016 on-prem. So this is one, I'm honestly surprised this doesn't happen more often, but I haven't reproduced it yet because I just saw the post right before we went on air. But apparently search results from non-default zone URLs will not show up in the results. And I guess, you and I have played with search a bunch, you more than me over the years, but I have always just pointed search at the default zone URL and have always just assumed that that's the only thing that I could trust to work.
Yeah, and for a long time, right? I mean, and once again, we're showing our age, but if you think back to 03 and 07, I mean, that was basically the only way to get it to work all the time. And so, and I think the way we used to tell our customers, I think, was, whatever the most correct URL is, that's got to be in the default zone, and that's where you got to push search to. Yeah.
And so I read through that, and I'm like, God, I'm surprised anybody expects anything else to be the case. Like, it might work accidentally sometimes. So that's out there. I will update my regressions page once we get it there. But as always, you can go to toddclinton.com. I restructured the top nav a little bit. Now there's like a builds bar at the top and then a drop down for the different versions of SharePoint. So once I get that up there, you can go to the 2016 builds and catch that regression.
Oh, I did not know that we had restructured. I did not approve this change. Did you bring it to the governance committee?
Well, so here's what happened, Shane. When I made this change, I asked Lori, and Lori approved the change. And there's no need to get your approval after that. I went over your head.
I don't know how I feel about this conversation anymore.
I just didn't. I don't know if you were around, or I just didn't want to go through the extra steps. I made the change. Lori, does this look good? She's like, I like it. There we go. That's how it works. So.
Well, I mean, you are on SharePoint 2010, so the number of options available to you are very, very constrained.
I don't know. I'm beginning to think it's it's like having a manual transmission in a car. That's almost like a theft deterrent device anymore because nobody can drive manuals. So, it's like hacking SharePoint 2010. Nobody could. What? I don't even. Huh?
Well played. Well played.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of demand to hack the list. They can put in their own DNS exploit for the download links that you put in there. Is that probably what they're after?
Yeah, I haven't checked my comments lately.
Yeah, every time I go to your pages now, I look in the comments just to see how interesting they are.
So the problem with that is, for whatever reason, there's a ton in there too. I don't get alerts on the comments. I can't get them, and I've tested it. Lori can get them, but so I don't see when new comments come in. So when the spam comments come in, I just don't know. So I have to remember to manually go in once a week and clean out comments.
Yeah, that's knock on wood. My YouTube comments have not. I've not had too many of those. YouTube's filter does a pretty good job of picking those up for me. But comments on blog posts, YouTube videos, that type of stuff. It can be a lot of work. So I understand your trepidation with dealing with that. So.
Yeah, and I think it's just because my website is so highly respected by Google and the other search engines that people know if they can squeeze a link to their crap on my site, that it's really going to help them. And so I don't begrudge them. I understand. So I see in the notes you've been doing some stuff with SQL, decimals, numerics.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. Someone yesterday emailed me and said, "Hey, I want to have a field in my SQL table. And I want to be, a decimal type of number, right? So 4.2 type of number."
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Should I use a decimal field?" And I was in the middle of something. I just replied back, "I don't know. I've never used a decimal field. I always use numeric and then, like 9,2. And I explained to him that means, you get 9 on the left, 2 on the right. And that's typically what I use for customers. And so I sent that email off to him, and I started going, maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Maybe you could be doing it better. Maybe you're doing it right, but you could be doing it better.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, definitely when it comes to like SQL, that level of like nerdiness around SQL, you know, how to store the data inside the tables, I'm faking it for the most part.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I went and did a little research, and it turns out that the decimal column and the numeric column are the same thing. They just decided to give us two different ways. That right, literally the first line of documentation says they are synonymous. I was like, there you go. Docs.microsoft.com said they're synonymous. I didn't do it wrong.
My work here is done.
Right? Confirmation bias. I had proof that I was right.
Yep. I've been right all along. I thought I was wrong once, but I was mistaken. Yeah.
So I don't know. I thought that was just a fun little fact that I'm guessing no one, right? I'm guessing you just either use one or the other and have never, I didn't even, full disclosure, I didn't even realize there was one called decimal.
Yeah.
But, you know, and so, yeah, I thought it was kind of fun that they're just the same thing.
Yeah. And that's something you and I, not developers, not programmers. So we don't deal with typing much. And I lean a lot on, so my platform that I do the most of that stuff in is PowerShell. And PowerShell does a pretty good and pretty predictable way of typing between things.
Yep.
And I just lean on that. And 90% of the times, PowerShell figures it out. If it doesn't, you know, I'll type it when I define it. And then 100% of the time it works. And it's, yeah, we are very spoiled.
Yeah. Well, and so SQL columns, so if you were going to do the SharePoint equivalent of a single line of text, what is your go-to column?
I don't design table schemas enough to have that.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I would look whatever string or whatever character. I don't know.
So for me, so the SQL Management Studio Designer defaults to nvarchar, okay. And then nvarchar 50, right? So 50 characters. Yep. And you can change that to whatever you want. Or there's an nvarchar max, which is some cartoon number. But so somewhere along the way, and I don't know where or why, someone told me that instead of nvarchar, that varchar was better than nvarchar.
Because var and nvarchar is variable length.
So I went with varchar. So my standard is varchar 50 for, you know, a field. And I could be completely wrong, and I admit that. But my research for the whole 5 minutes of it that I did, maybe it's 10, came back with varchar. So yeah, if you're listening to the show and you're a SQL person, you're like crying right now, like, what in the hell is he talking about? Feel free to tweet us or email us and say, hey, dummies, you should not use nvarchar or varchar. You should be using, I don't know, whatever weird column type I've never heard of that you think I should. I'm open to that advice because I'm like Todd. I do quite a bit of these days, but man, I just paw my way through just enough to make it work. And
that's exactly it. So we are hacks. If it works, it must be right.
Yes.
The whole George Costanza thing, if it works, how can it be wrong? In the chat room and in the notes, Lori, if you want to add this to the notes, I have a docs.microsoft.com article that explains what all those are and then what the recommendations are for which ones to use between nchar and nvarchar and all that kind of stuff.
Did it say I was right?
No, absolutely not.
Darn it.
Well, and I was not reading the article. I was busy paying attention to you in our chat room. But yeah, so for folks listening to this, there'll be a link in the show notes on what all those are and the definitions of them and
there should that. Be, I mean, somewhere in their documentation, there should just be a line that just says Shane is right. I mean, that I would expect that literal little string in the documentation.
So, you know, there's all these challenges, like if you can find a phrase that has no hits on Google or Bing, you know, I'm guessing the phrase Shane is right has got to be real close to one of those phrases that, like, even Google spiders in the dark, scary places of the internet. Nope, nobody's sentence never uttered. So, but that's good to know because I, again, like you, if I get it to work, I don't investigate any farther. And then I have, you know, like Jeff Hicks, if I'm doing something in PowerShell that I'm going to share, I will show it to him and he will scoff me and, you know, all that kind of stuff and then fix some of those things. But no, that is good. That is good.
Now I'm not. When you're talking for now, I'm reading this documentation.
Well, no, so well, that was fine, except the next thing on the notes is also yours. So,
well, I said only when you were talking. When it's my turn to talk, I'll pay attention.
just waiting to talk. You weren't listening. You were just waiting to talk.
I think we know some people that are very good at that.
We have used that phrase to describe people before.
All right, yeah. So next up on the list was kind of staying in a developer-y feel almost. PowerApps just announced that the components feature had went to preview. And so what components are, well, if you're not familiar with PowerApps, this is not going to help at all. But basically you can take one or more controls and build a set of functionality and then deploy that in your app as a component so you can reuse that throughout your app.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we realized, or they realized, is that in a lot of apps like mine, I might have to take these three pieces and wire them together 17 times on 17 different screens because I need that functionality of maybe a pop-up or headers or pickers, those type of things. I need that functionality to go throughout the app. But in the previous model, or in the current model, you have to basically wire those three controls up on every single screen. And if you realize, oh, they really wanted it to do blah, then you have to go to all 17 screens and make that change. So the idea of components is we're going to take those three things, we're going to wire them together in a component, and then we can reuse a component throughout our app. And if we update the components, then everywhere in that app, then that functionality will change.
Yeah, and that comes up, when you and I taught the PowerApps thing at SP TechCon here a couple of weeks ago, there were a bunch of questions about reusability and all of those different things. And I think some of them were questions that people didn't know that they had because they had just done enough with it. But that's one of those things. People were asking. You've got a great way to make sure your branding and your color and all those things are consistent, so you can change one place and it cascades through. So I think this component thing is another piece of that because people are starting to look at not just getting the thing done, but how to scale it and how to reproduce things and reusable components and all that.
Yeah, and the really wild thing about these components, so it's one thing to think about, okay, you just took those three controls and you can kind of plop them in, but with a component, and this is where we get like super nerdy developer-y all of a sudden, with components you can have inputs and outputs. So I can pass data to the component, let it do its thing, and then suck data back out of it in a very PowerApps-like manner. But I'm not going to lie, for people who are not spectacular at PowerApps, it's going to take a while to wrap your brain around how you push data in and get data out, because the component itself is a black box, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to use these properties to get stuff in and out. And I played with it last night for a little bit, and it's super powerful. It's going to be super awesome, but it's going to take me a while to figure out how to teach people to do that other than, the hello world type of example, because there's a lot there, and kudos to the PowerApps team. That's going to be really awesome once I can kind of really go get lost in there for a while. And
and it just reminds me, I was showing somebody the Azure AD Connect stuff, setting up in a test environment, and they're going to need to do it in production. And I'm like, what you need to do is you need to set this up in a test environment and then just go click everything. Like you said, just get lost in there and break all kinds of stuff and get your hands dirty. And then when you do it in production, it will all make sense and all the pieces will fall together. So that is a big part of, that's one of the things I like about what we do, is just that, getting in there and discovering stuff and figuring things out. And
I 100%, the breaking and the breaking is always good. And I think another thing that, you've kind of addressed before is really, so what they should do is go into the test environment. They should click all the buttons. They should break it, fix it, get lost. And then when they feel like they've got it, try to explain it to a first grader, right? Or a fourth grader. Try and make it so you can explain it to a child. And if you can do that, holy bagoli, you understand that piece of technology. And that's one of the things I'm going to struggle with components, right? So last night, I kind of got to the point where I could get in there and I understood it. But now I got to go get lost for a long time, because before I can make a video about it, right, I've got to be able to explain it to a young child, which is what the people on YouTube really like about my content, right? Is because I don't just be like, oh, look, this is awesome. Yay. Oh, that button's scary. Right? I'm like, hey, here's all the pieces. Here's the context. And that's the hard part.
Yeah, and one of the things, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, how to break that down. And I can't remember whose method it was. It's in the show notes for the previous one. But this idea that when you're explaining it to a little kid, you can't use any jargon. Yeah. And jargon is shortcuts for I don't understand what's going on. And so you can't just like, well, we wired up the component and we did the thing, because your 5-year-old's going to go, what's a component? How does a component work? And you go, it's a component. See, and you can't lean on jargon, and that's one of the big things is you have to, it's modularized pieces of.
Yeah, it reminds me of the way that I explain resource groups to people at first when I get them in Azure, right? I have to use the word group to explain what a resource group is, but once I say it, I then say, I know it sucks, I used it, and I bring it back,
yep.
But it would be real simple, just be like, well, resource group is a group of resources, and move on, right?
Yep.
And you can't do that. You got to be like, I'm not going to explain it to you guys, but it's really difficult to try and overcome just being like, oh, resource group's just a group. Duh. It's tough.
Yep. No, and I had the same discussion with somebody last week about site collections. Like, oh, it's a collection of sites. Well, that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of that whole mess of.
Remember my big black trash bag?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I broke down and used that analogy with them or not, but I was close.
I have not done.
This is for SharePoint Online, so that discussion's a little different.
Yeah. Wow, that's been a long time though since we've had to stand up there and talk about users creating trash and
dumpsters and oh yeah.
I remember when the dumpster came up out of the blue one day, like, yeah, that works too. Yep. Just throw it.
Yep, throw it in the dumpster. So that's good. So another PowerApps thing in there. You got another topic here for us? You
really just don't want me to read my SQL documentation, do you?
Am I keeping you from anything more important? Am I?
Yeah, I know. So staying on the PowerApps, I was trying to kind of reflect on what I've been fighting with recently, because like you, right, we've been super busy and didn't have a lot of fancy news articles. So I was trying to kind of think about, well, why have I been too busy to have fancy news articles? And one of them is that a very, very, very popular topic in PowerApps is using Flow to make PDFs. It turns out people like PDFs.
Yes, people have a love affair with PDFs, absolutely.
So we've been making a lot of those, right? And so I've got a couple different YouTube videos out there that we've talked about here before. But recently, we''ve been doing a lot of projects where they're like, oh, well, your video is great and all, but I want you to do it because, well, that looks like a pain.
Fair. That's how that works. That's it's working.
Yeah, and so it's been really challenging from the standpoint that the step one. So if you haven't done it before, is from PowerApps you need to generate HTML that is perfect.
Yep.
So you send that over to Flow. Flow creates a file in OneDrive of that HTML, and then Flow has a built-in connector to convert that HTML file to a PDF. And then you save that PDF or email it PDF. You do whatever you want with a PDF once Flow has generated it from the HTML.
Yeah.
But so making HTML, in its simplest form is super easy. But one of the things that we found is that the PDF converter is hyper specific, right? It does not accept HTML that is kind of correct, which is different than Chrome or Edge or IE. Whereas if you give an HTML file and it's missing some tags or you kind of didn't do it exactly right, they're like, we got this.
It'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't even mock you. They just render it correctly. So that's been a really new skill set, not new, a new old skill set, refining and writing perfect HTML. I thought I would just kind of mention a couple of things we've ran into recently. One is that the input for the HTML to PDF converter inside of Flow, the HTML file can only be 2.5 megs. So if it's nothing but text, not a big deal. Turns out people like pictures.
Yes, very visual.
Yeah, I have a client right now who wants their HTML to have 60 images, right? Because they're doing an inspection and they want to be able to take the output of that inspection and make a nice, multi-page PDF with all of the different images from all the different things they inspected. Which is about 60 pictures. That turns out to make about a 25 meg.
Just a touch over the 2.5 meg limit.
Just a tad. So that's been a limitation, which I haven't decided. Hopefully in the next week or two, I'll give you guys kind of a final way that we're going to go. There's different paths you can go to kind of do that, but they all require third-party or Azure functions or telling the customer no. So I don't know which one of those we're going to come up with yet.
Yep.
So that's been interesting. The other one is we found a bug. I'm going to call it a bug because I'm certain it's a bug in Internet Explorer.
No way.
Which is interesting, right? I immediately said, who the heck cares?
Yep.
But there's a lot of companies that IE 11 whatever is still their standard enforced browser. And
we talked about that last week. That's just a bad idea.
It's crazy to me. But so what was fun, though, was the guy who was troubleshooting the problem he was convinced that the problem was that, IE 11 couldn't show the PDF. He'd forgotten kind of troubleshooting 101. So basically he was using a Power App to create the PDF. Mm-hmm. And then there was a button at the bottom that said, show me the PDF. And so you press the button, it would open up a new tab with a link to the PDF, and it was supposed to render the PDF.
Okay.
So when you press the button in Chrome or Edge, doop, 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 psh, new tab, there's your PDF, life is perfect. Mm-hmm. Same thing in IE 11, new tab opens, the URL is up at the top, the screen is completely white. He was really perplexed, so he kept thinking, well, it's having a hard time with PDF, the HTML. He was trying to troubleshoot all these different pieces. It turns out that for whatever reason, IE was not basically pressing enter. It was opening the new tab. It was putting the URL up in the bar, but it was not actually hitting enter. It was not loading the page.
Yep.
So all you had to do in IE was go over and
click the arrow.
Yep. Click the arrow, press the enter button, and it would render just fine. So he probably wasted a whole day troubleshooting that problem. And so in the end, we figured out a workaround to use SharePoint's PDF viewer. So we concocted the whole SharePoint URL and put our PDF in it. And so that page, IE's like, oh, I can load that. And it worked just fine. But it was, I mean, the weird scenario problems you have with all these browsers, I don't know. I guess I don't have a real point to that story other than, oh my God, we wasted a whole day trying to figure out what was wrong with the PDF. And it turns out, you just need to press enter.
Yeah, that's rough. Yeah, and that's definitely an assumption. You just assume that if the tab opens and the URL's there, that it's going to load the page. That's a tough one.
So, anyway, lots of HTML skills, lots of PDFs to be made. Size matters. IE stinks.
Looking forward to that. Looks like you're having some flashbacks, a little PTSD there.
I was going to let you have a topic, but...
Okay, well, I will do that.
I can't read, remember?
Yeah, so one of the tools that I use all the time, I have multiple instances of it open at all times on the computers that I use, is OneNote.
Yep.
I live out of OneNote. Everything's in OneNote. And I haven't read the entire thing yet, but I saw an article on Petri by Russell Smith about how to email things to OneNote. And this is something I'm going to have to look at it and see exactly how everything stitches together. But there are definitely times when I have things that I encounter, web pages or stuff that I want to spit into a OneNote somewhere and just don't know of a good way to do it. And so I'm going to have to read through this and see if this is a way to do that. So very excited. I'm looking forward to reading this before and then trying it out.
And it's interesting, right? So I'm guessing like you liked it when you paste in content from a web page into OneNote. OneNote tags it and says, oh, it came from here and kind of connects all the dots for you.
Sometimes. To put it succinctly, I like it when I like it.
Got it.
And when it does it and I don't want it to do it, I hate it. And I can't imagine why anybody thinks it's a good idea. But when I do, yeah. So part of me, yes. So there are times when I'm doing things, I love that it puts all the context and when it did it, what the link is, and yes, that is all great. But and I'm thinking about it now because of the podcast. If I'm like, so when I make the show notes for this, the title of his post is in the page. Yep. So how to send emails to OneNote. If I paste that into OneNote, it does the thing you talked about. It leaves that text in there, and then what's the little thing? But we have an outline in OneNote that is what I copy and paste into the thing. So all that extra stuff sucks and I don't want it. And then I curse OneNote and have to remind myself, paste as plain text and then grab the URL and all of that. But yes, otherwise OneNote is a great tool.
Yeah, I think in OneNote, I've actually switched my default paste to be plain text.
Yes, I've done that before, and you can do that with all of the Office apps, Word, all Excel. And I've done that at numerous times, but then as I uninstall apps and install machines, I've forgotten to do that. And yes, but that is a good tip. If you find yourself constantly having to Control-Z, paste as plain text, all of the Office apps have the default paste as plain text.
Very cool.
Yep.
Back to modern, the ups and the downs, right? Modern versus classic. Sounds like you've had to explain that a few times recently.
So that's something I don't know if we've talked about it much on the show, but I have in my OneNote, my OneNote of blog posts that I think I should write that I will likely never write. One of them is comparing and explaining modern versus classic in SharePoint. Mostly SharePoint Online, but some SharePoint on-prem. Now that 2019's out. And twice in the last week, I have had to explain that to people. And I don't mean that in a condescending tone, but I've had to discuss that with people because there is just a bunch of confusion over what is what. And so just today, I was talking to a customer, and they were some page elements, I don't want to get down in the rabbit hole, but some page elements weren't behaving on a modern page the way they should behave compared to how other modern pages behaved. And so we were trying to figure out why when you click this thing that exists on both pages that looks the same, when you click it on one page, it goes one place, and you click it on another page, it goes another place, and they're both modern team sites. And so the person that I was talking to said, well, I think this used to be a classic team site, and then they updated it to modern, and that's the thing. And I'm like, I don't think you can do that. Like, you can change the pages, but you can't change the template that the site is on. And so, but, this whole thing was like an hour long, but I'm like, well, okay, so let's go into SharePoint admin. You can go in, you can see the active sites. This tells you the template. Modern team sites show up as team site. Old team sites show up as team site classic experience. They both showed up as team sites. I'm like, okay, so this was not a classic team site that was upgraded. So I'm like, all right, let's just start what's different. And turns out the one that was behaving incorrectly had a bunch of the publishing features turned on. And that was what had changed that behavior. The one that worked correctly did not have those publishing features turned on. But it was just that whole thing, like neither one of us could just look at a thing and determine whether it was classic or modern, not by how links work, not by how the page, because that's, and the other one, I was talking to somebody about team sites again, and they were swearing that they had a classic team site, but again, things weren't behaving the way I understood classic team sites to display. So I ended up, it was one of these rare occurrences where Teams was working. So I shared my screen and I'm like, okay, so when you create a team site, there's 3 different types that you can create. You can create a fully groupified modern team site. You can create a modern team site that does not have groups, that has old SharePoint permissions, or you can create a classic team site. And so it turns out the thing that they had been promising me was a classic team site had really been a modern team site with the classic permissions. And so that was, and so, I mean, and it's no fault of either customer, it's honest mistakes, but that whole thing has just gotten so murky and ugly.
So Meryl had the same kind of reaction that I did around publishing features in modern. Is that allowed? I mean, is that a terrible idea? Or I really don't know. I haven't even considered that.
Bad idea or worst idea?
Yeah,
it absolutely works because that's what these folks had done. And this goes back to our SQL typing discussion before. They were, weeks ago, months ago, whatever, trying to do a thing, whatever that thing was, and saw somewhere that turning publishing on would get them that thing that they wanted. They turned publishing on, it got them the thing that they wanted, and they moved on to the next fire. And then just didn't understand what all the other things were that lit up. And the other thing for that particular thing that gets even more complicated is there is a site collection feature for publishing and then a site or web feature for publishing.
Yeah,
so when we were talking about this, I'm like, maybe publishing's turned on. We turned site collection publishing on. It did not make that change. And I'm like, man, I was sure that's what added it. And then we went and turned the web publishing. I'm like, that did it.
Yeah, that was one of those things that even in the SharePoint heyday, I never completely could wrap my head around the site collection publishing. I mean, I knew the order of operations, but I did not want to explain that to a first grader.
No, it was tough. It was tough, but that was fun because in that thing that I got to talk to the customer about using Control F because I'm like, there's 2 sets of feature links in there. I can only find, because it was the site settings page. There's a million things in there. I can't find the other one now. I can't find it. Control F, FEA. I'm like, I just, always Control F. Yeah.
Well, and so back to our old school SharePoint days. I think you want to introduce a new special segment, and it's kicked off by an old school fan. So
yeah. So there was I can't remember what started it all. Drew, that's right. Drew Madelung was talking about how he saw a copy of our 2010 book in the wild. So that book is, legitimately almost 10 years old now. And so it started this whole thing on Twitter about all that. And I think we need to start a fan of the week segment, because this week our fan of the week would be Bonne Springer. And I bring that up because she mentioned that back in 2010, so right after the book came out, she was in the emergency room on her way to being sent to the intensive care unit. So the woman was clinging on to life. And that's not even hyperbole. She was going to the intensive care unit. And her husband, who is, thinking about what life without her is going to be like, and very, remorseful and sad because of this horrible thing, he's like, is there anything that I can do for you, honey? Anything at all? And I just imagine this thing where she kind of grabs him, pulls him in closer, because she barely has air in her lungs, and she whispers in her ear, bring me Todd and Shane's SharePoint 2010 admin book. That was the thing that Bonnie wanted. In the hospital, going to the ICU, the thing that she wants is our SharePoint 2010 book.
I would like to stop right there and just say I'd like to nominate you for is it a Golden Globe, or I don't know which one of the awards it is. I can just buy you that you'll be on the TV show, but that may have been the best scene that I've witnessed. I felt all the emotions. I felt the love. I felt the danger, the inquiry. Your acting skills right there. You should just stop. Get off the show. I will sponsor your Golden Globe. We'll be there in Hollywood, buying our awards just like everyone else. And bravo.
I didn't overdo it. I didn't. I felt like I overdone. Oh, you're too kind.
Oh, imagine how good it must really be if I'm complimenting you instead of saying it sucked.
That's true. For those of you that are listening to the audio, go back and grab the video. This is, 45 minutes in, something like that. So I just thought, I don't even know how you respond after that. I don't know that there's higher praise than that. So Bonne Springer, fan of the week. That's
kudos to Bonnie. Yeah, and that's it's interesting what people turn to in their time of need.
Yes, as they're staring at trying to decide whether to walk into the light or not, the thing that will make them feel good. Yeah.
And one of our new customers, he said, last weekend I had the flu. I was in bed, couldn't move. I was dying, and I just binge watched, not Netflix, not Game of Thrones. He binge watched all of my PowerApps videos in one weekend session of having the flu. Maybe it's the medicine that caused him to do it. But I'm just thinking, when I have the flu, the last thing I want to do is listen to my dumb butt talk about PowerApps. So this guy must have been super delirious. He might have been in ICU and didn't realize it.
Fever haze. So I assume that what happened. So, and this is a common thing. When something is invading your body has different mechanisms of releasing the thing and getting it out of there. And vomiting is one of those ways. And perhaps that was his body's way of trying to trigger that to get whatever the pathogen was. He's like, I can't expel things. You know what will make me vomitous and all that? Shane's YouTube channel. I assume that's what that was.
I don't know. I guess next time I get the flu, I just and I think we've talked about this in the years past, right? But I haven't had the flu for 2 flu seasons now. And I've got a few more years before the flu is dangerous, right? As we're getting older and the flu becomes dangerous. But right now we're still good. But getting the flu on a yearly basis was a great weight loss method, right? I would lose 10 pounds like clockwork every winter when I would get the flu, and that would put me back down to a reasonable weight. Yep. And I'm gonna lie, there's an extra 10 pounds sitting here that, if you got the flu and you want to come make out with me for a couple minutes, I would appreciate that. 'Cause I want these 10 pounds to go away. I don't want to do all the hard work. I just want to be sick in bed for 2 days and let it, as you said, expel itself, however it happens.
Oh, I think we probably lost our iTunes family rating there. I think.
I guess it's probably an incorrect way to lose weight. Is that what you're trying to tell me? I'm teaching people bad habits?
And again, we talked earlier about Googling for phrases that don't exist. I think the phrase, if you have the flu and you want to come make out with me, I think is probably a phrase that's never been uttered by humans before. I think that's...
Oh, this has been one of our better shows. We're doing good here.
Let's talk about some happier things besides all that stuff. A couple of things. So you got a Surface Laptop 2 a couple of weeks ago, and you're still loving that?
Yeah, almost 2 months now. It's been on a couple of different business trips, and I think there's two. And just so everybody has kind of perspective, right? I've had nothing but Surface Pros since the Surface line came out. Right? I haven't owned a laptop since, so I don't know how many years that's been.
Yeah,
but
long time.
The Pro was always nice because it was very portable. It had the touchscreen, the flip, the blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, doing real work on it, like writing, content or that type of stuff, wasn't really great. Flimsy keyboard turned out not to be good for when, you end up having to type 10,000 words in a day, which I've done a lot of recently. And
yeah, and just the fact that it wasn't a laptop and it had that stand made it sit weird ways.
Yes. So that was kind of one of the negatives of the Surface Pro. The other big one was the battery. The battery life itself was fine,
but
it didn't really like to go to sleep. So pretty much anytime I would throw it in my laptop, whether it was asleep or turned off, I knew when I went and got it out of my laptop or out of my backpack a week later, 2 weeks later, right, because it's not my daily driver, that it was going to be dead. It was just accepted the Surface was going to be dead. The Surface Laptop 2, it turns out, actually goes to sleep. So when I haven't used it in a week, and I go pull it out of my bag, it still has a full battery. And I can use it right then when I want to use it instead of being like, oh, well, let me get this on the charger so I can use it in 8 hours. So
then how do you keep your backpack warm then when you're not using it? Because that's what your Surfaces used to do, is always keep the backpack at a nice 90 degrees.
I know. I mean, the food that I keep in there is not, molding nearly as fast as it used to.
You're going to have to go melt it yourself now? That's going to be extra work for you.
Yeah. But no, really the Surface Laptop 2, the performance has been outstanding. The battery just working has been outstanding. And the fact that it is truly back to a clamshell, a proper laptop. I mean, I'm doing a project for Microsoft Learn, and I mean, I've written tens of thousands of words over the last couple months. It's like flashbacks back to the book writing days. But I've done a lot of that content right there on the Surface, and it has been just as good as sitting here on super computer and doing it. So,
well, that's good. That's yeah, and I've never the Surface. So which do you have, the 13.5 or the 15-inch?
Well, the Surface Laptop 2 only comes in one size. Okay. I don't know what size my screen is. Yeah. But I did go with, so I've got the 16 gigs of RAM. Yeah. I think it's irresponsible to buy. I think 16 gigs of RAM is almost irresponsible.
It is at the low end of whatever I would get. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, my super PC here has 32 gigs, and I have not ran into issues with that yet, but I'm sure those days are coming soon.
Yeah.
But no. Really happy with my hardware purchase there. It was a little pricey, I'm not going to lie, but really happy with it.
Yeah. So I also did that, but I went to the other end. On Sunday, I ordered a Surface Go.
Go.
That's, I've been a big fan of the Go-Go's, and so this just seems natural. So the Surface Go is on the far extreme other end of the Surface line. So it is a small, cheap 10-inch tablet. Okay. Kind of like what the Surface 3 successor, or maybe even like the Surface RT successor from way back in the days, and smaller one, detachable keyboard, the kickstand that nobody likes, and all that kind of stuff. And this is, I'm just kind of playing to this. The main reason that I got it was twofold. I have, a dozen tablets. Let's be honest, but I have a 10-inch tablet that I got at Best Buy a year or so ago for like $100, and I use that a lot when I'm on planes because it's small. And it's got decent battery life, Creating content's not great, but it's great for watching movies and things like that. If I'm in a hotel room, I'll hook it up to the monitor or the TV and stream Netflix or whatever. But it only has 2 gig of RAM, and it feels like $100 tablet. It's got a detachable keyboard and all that, but I found out that I use it a lot, and I find myself constantly frustrated that it doesn't do stuff. Okay. So I thought, well, this is probably worthy of an upgrade then. So the Surface Go is roughly the same size, has a detachable keyboard, so I can use it as a tablet, all that kind of stuff. But then it also has an LTE spot, an LTE card. So that was kind of the other thing that put me on the edge. I've got Google Fi for one of my accounts, and Google Fi gives you free data SIMs. So you don't pay extra for the SIM. The data still comes off your contract, but the SIM itself doesn't cost you anymore. Whereas with AT&T, every device is like another $15 a month or something. So I've got this LTE SIM just laying around that I'm not using. I'm like, I'm going to get, like the next tablet or laptop that I get will have an LTE spot. So I'm going to try this. So I should be getting that today. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing. I'm imagining that LTE in a tablet is very convenient. So I'm certainly happy.
And this one, again, you and I, because of our phones and all that, we have different needs. The Surface Go has USB-C. It will charge with that, which is important to me. Does not have an HDMI out, but I can get a USB-C to HDMI adapter for pretty cheap, so I'll probably do that.
Because it's not an Apple adapter, which would be $74.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So next week I'll talk about that a little bit.
I look forward to it. All right, we probably should start wrapping this puppy up. We have went long.
Super late. Yeah. So SharePoint Saturday, Kansas City, October 19th. I will probably be there. I don't know what I'll be doing, but I'll be there. What about you? What do you got going on?
Fox Valley SharePoint user group I'm doing in 5 hours from now.
Shout out to Eric.
Yep, Eric has tricked me into doing his thing. So I would put a link, but it's not. You got to be there in the Fox Valley, so be there, be square.
Yep, still time to get there.
Yep. Then don't forget my PowerApps and Flow training class. So tomorrow, February 21st, is the Intro 101 class, and then next week, Monday through Thursday, I will be teaching you all the advanced, wicked cool stuff that I love to do. So that'll be lots of fun.
All right.
Then we're back to Kansas City.
Yep. So in a couple of weeks, Monday, March 11th, I'll be going down to the Kansas City user group, speaking to them over the lunchtime. Looking forward to that. Looking forward for an excuse to drive my car. Hopefully the snow, the 7 inches of snow we got today will be gone by then. Can never take that for granted. Then that Thursday, or actually that Wednesday, I'm heading down to Branson, Missouri for Mark Rackley's North American Collab Summit. That is March 14th through the 15th. And then I can't remember what sessions I'm doing there. You're doing some PowerApp stuff. And then Saturday, you're spending an extra day down there in the Ozarks.
Yep. Going to do all day, 8 glorious hours, or I don't know how many hours it really is, of PowerApps and Flow training. So if you're going to be at that conference, that is a great way to accelerate your PowerApps and Flow career. I think the focus will be kind of getting everyone up to speed and on the same page. So it's not going to be the 400 level content that'll come up next week in my proper class. It'll be more like 100 and 200 with a sprinkling of 400 level, because sometimes I just can't help myself. And I'm like, let me show you this cool thing I did.
Yeah, and I think that worked out well for the audience that we had, in Austin. That was exactly the right content. There were some people who were beginners that didn't know what to expect, and we did a good job guiding them through. And then you drop those crazy things to kind of inspire them to take the next step. So I think it was a good mix.
Yeah, it's a weird place of the technology, right? There's a lot of people that have never used it, and there's a lot of people that have used it enough to be dangerous. And so trying to get them all on the same page is one of our goals. And I think we did good. So. Yeah.
A couple weeks after that, you're going to be doing SharePoint Saturday in Omaha. That will be a good one.
Yep. So SharePoint Saturday in Omaha. On the 30th, I am doing the keynote because they wanted a spectacular draw.
And since they couldn't find any, they settled for you.
Yep. But the day before, on that Friday, I'll be doing an all-day PowerApps and Flow class out there. So if you're in the Omaha market and you want to spend a day learning about PowerApps and Flow, like we just explained in the 2 previous segments, it'll also be available there in Omaha. Yeah,
and if I remember right there, that's a fairly, that's a pretty cheap one for all day. I can't remember what the price is. I don't want to misquote it, but if you're just a little PowerApps curious, this is going to be probably the cheapest way to get an all-day class.
I think it's $50.
Yeah, that's almost should almost be illegal. So.
And then you can tip your presenter when you're done if you feel like you didn't spend enough.
Has that ever happened? Has anybody ever tipped?
You offered me. No.
Yeah, that's a different thing entirely. I would be going and joining all that fun, but I'm going to be flying my way to Stockholm, Sweden for the SharePoint Exchange Forum, April 1st and 2nd. So if you're going to be in Europe, going to be in the Stockholm area, great place. Come check that out. I'll be there. Mark will be there. The Sympraxis crew will be representing over in Stockholm, so that will be good. And then finally, last but definitely not least, the SharePoint conference in Vegas.
Woo-woo.
Yeah, go to SharePointNA.com. You and I are doing an all-day session, and then we're going to go lounge by the pool, work on our tans. I will try not to burn my forehead again.
We will have a nice little private conference Cabana side, so I'm looking forward to that.
Get a pool boy. It'll be awesome. I look forward to it.
Yeah, that's that one should be good though. And remember, if you use the code YOUNG, you get to save a bunch of money, and you get a hug from me. So.
And I think you get cockroaches in your underwear drawer. I can't remember exactly what all the terms and conditions were, but I think that's...
Well, remember, cockroaches eat all the bad stuff, so they might clean up your underwear drawer a little bit.
Yeah, just keep telling yourself that. No, these cockroaches are a good thing, honey, honest. Yeah. All right, everybody. Chat room, we're going to stick around for a while. If you've made it this far in the podcast, thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Toodles.